You're passionate everywhere else, with your kids, with your friends, with your sisters, at your work. But at home, in your marriage, you start to feel like plain yogurt. You're quieter, more neutral. Maybe you measure your words or you edit yourself before you speak. Maybe you do on occasion open up and act more like yourself and be vulnerable, but he just says, and moves on. And then you feel unseen, unheard, and unsafe to just be yourself. And so over time, you make yourself small. If that's you, then stay with me. I'm a wife who has walked through emotional disconnection in her own marriage and have since helped dozens of women over years to be more themselves, to come alive within themselves in order to fall back in love with their lives and with their marriages once again. And today we're talking about why you might feel unseen and lonely within your marriage, and how to reclaim yourself and your voice within your relationship. Feeling lonely and unseen in your marriage is one of the most quietly devastating experiences that there are. And it's usually not loud or dramatic. It usually looks like a small when you said something and then moving on to the next thing, or you share something and it feels like it didn't quite land, or you open up and it feels like it didn't really matter or you didn't get the response that you were hoping for. It can look like a nod, a subject change, or a distracted response. And it can hurt. It can really feel like rejection. And then over time, something within you quietly shifts. Women don't randomly become dull, but women do often contract when something feels emotionally unsafe, or like it's unsafe to just be yourself, often because of fear of rejection. And feeling rejected and feeling unseen is incredibly painful. And so your nervous system learns to protect itself. It says, that was not a positive experience. That didn't feel good. And so I'm not going to do it again. Right? So you stop being vulnerable within your relationship. And in turn, you make yourself smaller and smaller and less like your true self. So you shrink, you become smaller, you become quieter and less true to yourself. Because the truth is, plain yogurt is protection, and you are not plain yogurt. If you can relate, if you feel this way, then I want you to know that you're not needy, you're not dramatic, you're not too much, and you are worthy, interesting, passionate. But you have adapted in order to self-protect, and here's the cost. Because the biggest problem isn't when you just feel dismissed or unseen. It's actually what happens within you afterwards. It's when you start to replay and question yourself. Did I not say that right? Am I not interesting enough? Am I not enough? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with him? What's wrong with our marriage? And it can start to feel like doom. And that can turn into shame. And shame is incredibly convincing. That's data, not necessarily doom. And here's the thing. You are not broken and nothing is wrong with you. You are guarded, and there's a big difference. So take a deep breath right now and know that you are worthy of being able to feel and be like yourself within your relationship, to feel lighter, to feel freer, to feel joyful, and to reclaim your voice. There was a time in my own marriage where I noticed that I was playful and lively and passionate in all other areas of my life. I devoured novels. I was playful with my children. I had lively and vivid hobbies and rich friendships and beautiful community and nourishing, delicious, flavorful meals. But within my marriage, I felt like plain yogurt. And when I say that, I mean that I just felt very tethered. I felt more neutral and calmer and quieter. Like I couldn't just be myself. I was measured. I dulled myself down. I quieted my excitement. I quieted my opinions. I kept vulnerable thoughts within my mind and closed down within my heart. And I was afraid to take emotional risks because I was afraid of feeling rejected and hurt and unseen. And I told myself at the time that I was just being mature, or that I was quieter with him than other people and that there was no problem with that. But that was not the truth. The truth was that I was desperately afraid of rejection. I was so afraid of feeling unseen. And so I preferred to just avoid and not take the risk at all. So, for example, when I lived at home and I was growing up with my sisters, I'm one of four sisters. So we would always play music in the kitchen while we were cleaning up the kitchen after dinner. And we would dance and sing and do karaoke. And it was always so much fun. And I noticed that with my husband, when he was around, first of all, I wouldn't even play music. And if I did, then I wasn't dancing around and singing. I was quieting myself down because I didn't want to be too much. I didn't want to be awkward. I don't know. I was afraid of being judged. And so I just didn't do that. I would just do the dishes quietly and have the music in my head. I remember even when I was driving home from work, I would sometimes stop at a cafe and get myself a latte and a croissant or a chocolate chip cookie or whatever. And when I would get home, instead of walking in with the treats that I got myself, I would crumple them up and hide them at the bottom of my purse and dispose of them before even walking through the door. Or another example is after I had my first child, I would sometimes lay down on the couch and try to nap when the baby napped, right? But when I heard him opening the door, like he was coming home from his break at work, I would quickly jump up and start tidying around because I didn't want to get caught relaxing. And so here's the thing, I didn't want him to think that I was too much, that I was weird, that I was selfish, that I was inefficient, or that I was self indulgent. And so I hid all of these things. I was hiding myself. I was hiding myself from him because I was afraid of being judged, and I was hiding myself from my marriage. And I think a lot of time, these fears, it's not that they come from nowhere at all. They come from experience, right? At some point in our lives, or even at some point in our marriages, we have experienced feeling unseen or feeling that sting of rejection. And so our nervous systems learn very quickly to protect themselves from that in the future. And so we make ourselves smaller and we hide. Maybe at some point you did experience a lack of curiosity or a distracted response, or not the response at all that you were hoping for, or feeling like you could have really used empathy and support and you didn't get that in that moment. And so the nervous system learns, don't go there. It's better to keep it all inside. And so I, in my own experience, slowly made myself smaller as I learned that. It wasn't because he demanded or ever asked that of me or even criticized me. It was all coming from myself, from my own fears, and adapting to protect myself from my own fears. And I realized over time, I didn't want to have walls up anymore. I didn't want to be this rigid, performative version of myself, this smaller, quieter version of myself that felt like plain yogurt. I wanted to feel alive again within my own marriage. I wanted to feel like the passionate woman that I am. I wanted to come alive in my curiosity, my creativity, my joy, my playfulness, my aliveness in all areas of my life, including my marriage. And here's the thing that I learned. I was outsourcing my aliveness as a woman to his responsiveness. And so that's the shift I want to offer you today. You cannot outsource your aliveness to his responsiveness. In other words, your feelings of worthiness and of enoughness and of recognizing how inherently worthy and wonderful you are cannot come from anyone outside of you, including your husband and his response or lack of response. It has to come from you. So without realizing it, many wives go about their marriage like this. I'll be playful when he engages. I'll be vulnerable when he empathizes and responds well. I'll be more myself when I feel seen and cherished as myself. And I understand, it's completely understandable that you would want to self protect and avoid rejection if you have ever felt unseen or rejected, or start to feel like you're not enough when you put yourself out there and don't get the response that you would hope for. But here's the thing, you are outsourcing your identity when you do that. And then emotionally under responsive, you start to disappear. And that's a problem. And so the shift is not care less what he thinks or what anyone outside of you thinks, right? The shift is stop abandoning yourself based on his response. That is self-loyalty. And so the lesson that I learned from this was uncomfortable at the beginning. It was that his sometimes limited response did not mean that I had limited worth. That sentence right there rebuilt me completely and completely shifted how I started to show up in my relationship. So instead of backtracking when he was quiet, or instead of trying to over explain or fill the silence, I stayed. I stayed true to myself and I sat in the discomfort. So, for example, if he said something offhand that kind of hurt my feelings, instead of just either getting defensive, just taking it, and then feeling resentful later, I would just say, ouch. I would just sit in the silence. I wouldn't jump in to over explain or get defensive. I would just allow that moment of discomfort to be there and to give myself permission to sit in that, to look at that in the eye, my truth, to look at my truth in the eye and put it on the table in an authentic, genuine, real way. To not feel like I had to rescue every moment in order to have everything be smooth and comfortable and neutral all the time. And from there, something really powerful happened. I started to feel more confident in myself, in my identity, in my thoughts, in my joys and my hobbies. I felt less ashamed, less small, more alive and more vibrant, and more seen and magnetic. And over time, our entire dynamic changed. Because here's the thing, when a woman stops shrinking, the emotional field between two people changes. He began engaging more, leaning in more, being more warm and more affectionate and more curious. And most importantly of all, I started to feel finally like I could just be myself. No second guessing, no backtracking, no over explaining. I just felt light and spacious and free to be myself. I felt finally truly seen and valued, and knew within myself that I was worthy and cherished and safe. And that was the real win. Most wives think, I need to communicate better, or he needs to change, and things aren't going to get better until he changes. But of course, the thing is, we cannot control anyone outside of ourselves, including him. The only person that we can control is always ourselves. And so the real shift, the real truth and lesson here is that when we can tolerate being vulnerable, when we can stretch into being truly vulnerable and honoring our truth and being genuine and authentic and in integrity without holding expectations as to what his response will or will not be, but doing it purely from the intent of honoring our own inner experience by voicing it, because we have every right to take up space in our relationship and to be true to ourselves, right? We're coming from that place rather than coming from a place of needing him to respond a specific certain way in order to qualify that as a success. That right there is emotional leadership and self-respect and self-integrity with your values and with the woman who you're meant to be in this world everywhere, including within your marriage. And so some husbands, we don't always know what's going on or what has shaped them to be and to have the responses or lack of responses that they have. Some men or some husbands are just uncomfortable or don't know what to do with emotional conversations or with vulnerability. And yet, that does not mean that you need to put yourself on hold. That does not make you wrong for wanting depth and wanting more and wanting deeper emotional intimacy. But you cannot wait for him to become emotionally fluent the way you want him to be before you allow yourself to be yourself, before allowing yourself to exist fully, because that is a trap and you can get stuck there for a very long time. So what does this look like practically in your day-to-day life? Start with 5% more expression, more truth, more alignment, with who you really are within yourself, without making yourself small, without second guessing, without over explaining or backtracking. I found it helpful back when I was first starting this journey to imagine that I was with a sister or with my best friend or with a child. How would I show up if I was with them? And have that guide. And it made it so much easier to let go of expectations because I was no longer performing or limiting how I was showing up based on how I thought or assumed that he would respond. It was just, this is who I am, and this is what I think, and this is what I bring, right? And there was no fear, oh, is he gonna think I'm too much or anything like that, right? Which, by the way, it was all just being in my head, anyways. Instead of being in my head, being fully present in the moment and being in my body and allowing that to relax and be free and to just be. And so, what would just 5% of more expression, of more of your truth look like for you? I'm not asking you to jump from 0 to 100, right? But just 5%. Would this look like a quick story about an experience that you had during the day? Would it look like, oh, I thought of you today? Or would it sound like, hey, I've missed you lately? Would it just be a moment of longer sustained eye contact when you would normally look away? Or a playful comment that you say without scanning for his mood first to see how it's going to land? And if he doesn't engage the way you wanted or expected this time, then you just remind yourself, this is for me. I'm reclaiming me. I'm becoming fully alive. And that right there is self trust. And self trust is magnetic. It's warm, it's inviting, and it draws other people in, including your husband. In my experience, this changed the dynamics between us drastically. No, not overnight, but little by little, the more that I took up space in my relationship and became more dynamically myself, more colorful, more courageous, more playful, more fun, more alive, the more and more connection I called in, and the more connected and seen and valued I felt. And so here's a question that I'd like to invite you to sit with. If he never changed, which in my experience, doing this does change the dynamic, but let's just say for the sake of the exercise, if he never changed, would you rather continue to make yourself small and feel quiet and feel like you're not worthy or feeling like you're not enough in order to avoid the risk of rejection? Or would you rather become fully alive in yourself, even if it's just for you? Because that question clarifies everything. Because there's a different kind of loneliness within a marriage. There's loneliness of feeling unseen, and then there's the loneliness of self abandonment. And you are not a woman who disappears, you are a woman who shines. Even if it feels vulnerable or feels awkward or feels strange or even scary, you are a woman who shines. Emotional loneliness in a marriage does not have to mean that your marriage is doomed. It means that there's a part of you that's wanting to come alive. And when that part of you does come alive, everything can change. And so if you've been feeling emotionally lonely in your marriage, maybe you feel like all you and your husband ever talk about are logistics about the day or what the kids are doing and what they're up to, and never about your truth or your heart or your real thoughts that you have. And you are a colorful, lively, vivid, passionate woman who's just waiting to come alive and to be seen as that and to be desired as that. And if you've slowly become grayscale in this one space in your life, your marriage, then I have to tell you this: you are worthy. You are not too much. You're not asking for too much, because you absolutely deserve to feel seen and cherished and valued for the beautiful, incredible person that you are. You're a woman who's longing to be seen, and that longing is human and healthy and normal, and you deserve to have your heart's desires. If this resonated with you, I created something It's called 3 Simple Shifts to Reignite Connection. It's a 20-minute audio that you can listen to while you drive to work or fold laundry or walk your dog. And in those 20 minutes, I teach you how to stop shrinking and how to rebuild and invite connection without having to feel like you're chasing or pleading for it. It's calm, grounded, and practical, very practical. The link is in the description. And if this felt like it put words to your experience, then comment the word reclaiming in the comments, because that's what this work is all about. Reclaiming yourself, reclaiming your voice, reclaiming your truth, and reclaiming your connection in your marriage. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video.